Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today, we bring you a story full of surprises and hidden angles that few people know about. Don't leave just yet. Just when you think you've figured it all out, there are fascinating and meaningful details waiting for you at the end of the video. Let's explore together and uncover the special message this video has for you. Are you ready? Let's get started. History tells a tale of a time when the records seem to repeat themselves. Sacred shrines looted, lands ravaged, and the blood of holy men soaked churchyards. Champions fell, families were torn apart, and children were carried off into slavery. It was then that Ireland understood the ferocity that had come ashore, the wrath of the Vikings. The Norsemen first arrived in 795, just 2 years after their initial attack on England. Year after year, their fleets plagued Ireland, growing bolder with every raid. Eventually, they established permanent settlements along the coasts and waterways. Among these, Dublin transformed from a sparse settlement into a fortified hub of Viking power, connecting Ireland to a vast trade network of goods, treasures, and slaves. Scandinavian royals, such as the famed Ivar the Boneless, likely arrived to establish ruling dynasties. Yet, Viking conquests inland proved challenging, as they trespassed on lands controlled by over 100 petty Irish kings. The Irish, living in stone or earthen ring forts, wore linens and woolen cloaks and showcased status with ornate brooches. Though Christianity had taken root since St. Patrick's efforts in the 5th century, Ireland was anything but tranquil. Clans battled fiercely for dominance. It was within this tumultuous landscape that the Vikings found themselves surrounded by an equally ruthless Irish warrior society. While Viking warriors donned helmets and armor, wielding swords, spears, and axes, the Irish fought with agility, favoring small shields, spears, and darts. Despite the Vikings' attempts to crush the Irish with raids and tributes, the resilient clans retaliated fiercely, forcing the Norsemen to play politics. Viking leaders forged alliances, sometimes marrying into Irish nobility and even converting to Christianity. Yet, alliances with one clan often sparked the ire of others, leading to further conflict. In 902, the Irish ousted the Vikings from Dublin, but the Norsemen returned with renewed vengeance. Recapturing Dublin, they unleashed a relentless wave of warfare, reducing Ireland to bondage and sorrow. The Irish were enslaved, their families torn apart, and the region of Munster suffered some of the worst atrocities. It was from this chaos that a figure of defiance emerged, Brian Boru. Chroniclers would later claim, "Bad was the luck of the foreigners on the day that youth was born." Born into the Dalkais clan, Brian was one of 12 sons, unlikely to inherit leadership. However, the Dark Times claimed his father and many of his brothers, leaving his brother Mathgamain as chief. Though Mathgamain struck a truce with the Vikings, Brian refused to accept peace. Relentlessly, Brian waged guerrilla warfare, hunting the Vikings day and night, sleeping on damp ground, and exchanging kill for kill. When his followers dwindled to just 15 warriors, he confronted Mathgamain, urging him to abandon the truce. His fiery resolve reignited the Council of Chiefs, marking the beginning of a campaign that would change Ireland's fate forever. In 967, a decisive battle unfolded as Brian and his forces met their Viking enemies with unrelenting fury. The retreating Norsemen were pursued, cut down, and driven back to the fortified town of Limerick. Brian, brave and cunning, showed no mercy. The town was engulfed in flames, reduced to ashes, and the fort destroyed. On the hills, the captives were gathered. Those fit to fight were executed, and those deemed suitable for servitude were enslaved. This victory cemented their dominance, but peace was fleeting. Brian's brother ruled as king over Munster until 976, when old rivals captured and executed Mathgamain. Ireland's whispers of the ancient world endured in sacred sites, hallowed bloodlines, and legends of pagan kings. It was under the shade of his clan's revered tree that Brian ascended to the kingship of his people. Without delay, he rallied his forces and sought vengeance. He attacked a monastic island, slaying the Viking ruler of Limerick and his sons, avenging his brother's death and reclaiming control over Munster. But his rise did not go unnoticed. The powerful High King of Ireland, Mael Secnail II, who had forced the submission of Dublin's Vikings in 980, now turned his attention to Brian. The High King raided Brian's lands and desecrated the sacred Delcashan tree, igniting years of bitter conflict. Undeterred, Brian fought tirelessly, consolidating his rule and using the fleets of his subdued Viking subjects to launch raids deep into Mael Secnail's territories. By 997, after over a decade of hostilities, the two kings made peace. They agreed that Mael Secnail would rule the north, while Brian Boru would reign over the south. This division of power, however, stirred unrest in Dublin. Sitric Silkbeard, the Viking king of Dublin, along with the province of Leinster, rebelled against Brian. Dormant under Mael Secnail's rule, Dublin's might now rose to challenge the growing power of Munster's king. Brian answered swiftly. In the final days of 999, he and his new ally, Mael Secnail, marched on Dublin. The forces of Dublin and Leinster met them in the ferocious battle of Glenmama. The hills ran red with blood as hundreds fell to Brian's victorious army. In early 1000, Brian exacted his retribution, plundering and burning Dublin to the ground. Its markets were looted, its treasures seized, and its people captured. So many Norse women and children were enslaved that, according to one record, Irish farmers no longer needed to work their own fields. Yet, Brian's approach to the Vikings was pragmatic. When Sitric submitted, Brian restored him to the throne of Dublin. The so-called foreigners were gradually merging into a Norse-Irish people, their fates intertwined. Sitric, in fact, was the son of Brian's wife, or former wife, from her previous marriage to a Viking king. To secure his loyalty, Brian married one of his daughters from another union to Sitric, binding him through blood and alliance. With Dublin and all the great Viking ports of Ireland now under his control, Brian's reign flourished. These hubs of commerce brought him wealth, ships, and warriors, solidifying his place as a formidable force in Irish history. Confident in his strength, Brian challenged Mael Secnail for control of the north. Though resistance was fierce, Mael Secnail eventually conceded, paving the way for Brian Boru to rise as the High King of Ireland. The aging monarch embarked on sweeping journeys across his realm, compelling rebellious kings to submit and fostering ties with the influential Church of Armagh, said to be founded by St. Patrick. There, a cleric granted Brian the grand title of Imperator Scotorum, Emperor of the Gaels. Under his rule, Ireland experienced relative peace as Brian focused on building great forts, round towers, and supporting churches. Yet, unrest brewed continually among ambitious vassals. In 1013, catastrophe struck when Dublin and Leinster once again rebelled. Mael Secnail joined Brian in an attempt to suppress the uprising, but their efforts were marred by setbacks, including the slaughter of Mael Secnail's son at the hands of Sitric Silkbeard. Sitric, determined to overthrow Brian, recruited Viking reinforcements from abroad. Earls and warriors from the Orkneys and the Isle of Man sailed into Dublin Bay, some of whom had recently participated in the Danish conquest of England. In 1014, Brian, now an elderly king, variously recorded as being between 73 and 88 years old, gathered an army 1,000 strong. He even secured aid from an earl of northeast Scotland. As spring arrived, Brian's forces ravaged the rebellious lands, advancing toward Dublin. Later histories would romanticize the coming clash as a pivotal moment for Ireland's future. While perhaps exaggerated, the threat of a re-emergent Viking Dublin backed by foreign allies was indeed dire. On Good Friday morning, Brian's forces faced the combined armies of Dublin and Leinster on a broad plain. The enemy ranks stretched far, their shields mail, and helmets gleaming in the rising sun. Led by Brian's son, Murchid, the Irish army clashed with their foes. The battle raged with unrelenting ferocity, as swords hacked and spears pierced, drenching the field in blood. Men fought with such fury that they became unrecognizable to their kin, and their weapons grew heavy with the hair of their enemies. Murchid fell in the chaos, but as the day wore on, Brian's forces turned the tide. The enemy broke ranks, retreating toward their ships. Many drowned as the tide swept them away, and the Vikings' strength crumbled. Victory was near when a small band of Vikings launched a desperate assault on Brian's camp. According to Icelandic sagas, it was Broder, a Viking chieftain, who struck down the aging king. The sagas tell of swift vengeance, with Brian's guard disemboweling Broder and dragging him around a tree until his entrails spilled out. Whatever the truth, the outcome was clear. Leinster and the Vikings were decisively defeated, and Brian Boru, the High King of Ireland, was no more. The Battle of Clontarf became both a symbol of Brian's great triumph and his ultimate sacrifice. With Murchid gone, the succession passed to Brian's other sons. Records suggest that male Secnail regained the title of High King, but his rule never matched the strength and authority of Brian's reign. Sitrick continued to rule in Dublin, and while Norse settlements remained hubs of trade, their power diminished under Irish dominance. The subjugation of the Viking invaders was not solely Brian's achievement, but the result of generations of Irish kings and warriors who refused to yield. Their stories of resistance and conquest remain undeniably captivating, much like the thrill of commanding battles in Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. In this tactical mobile game set in the grim, dark future of the Warhammer galaxy, you lead legendary champions from 15 factions in fast-paced PvE campaigns, competitive PvP battles, and collaborative boss fights. With over 60 champions to collect and more than 3.5 million players already engaged, Tacticus offers endless strategic challenges. The Adeptus Mechanicus faction, armed with arcane weaponry and cybernetic augmentations, is just one example of the game's dynamic content. Frequent updates ensure fresh modes and challenges, and best of all, it's free to play. Download Tacticus today through the link in the description and begin your conquest of the far future. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. If you found this story interesting and meaningful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any exciting content coming up. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. We're eager to hear from you. See you in the upcoming videos with more unique and meaningful stories. Stay with us.